Hello and welcome back to CEO.CA's Inside the Boardroom. My name is James Petham, and today I'm joined by George Ogilvie, President, CEO, and Director of Arizona Sonoran Copper. They trade on the TSX under the ticker ASCU. George, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, James.
So, certainly been a busy period for Arizona Sonoran. I know you were attending Beaver Creek. You've had some big news come out over the last few weeks. I want to maybe start with the financing, $34.5 million upsized bought deal.
Yeah.
Walk us through that impressive amount of money to raise during challenging capital markets. How'd you pull it off? How's the money going to be put to use?
Yeah, certainly very delighted with the results. As you said, these have been very challenging markets for the juniors, and to have an oversubscribed deal that ultimately was upsized was a tremendous outcome for the company. We've also seen a lot of new accounts come into the story, blue chip investors, and I think that's going to help with the liquidity with the trading as we move forward. How's the money going to be put to use? Well, obviously drilling at Mainspring is going to be very important. We've got to drill that out from an inferred resource to an indicated resource, and that should be completed by March of next year. And then there's additional column tests that are going to be required for the metallurgical work on Mainspring. Several months ago, we started up 6 columns, but just in the last 2 weeks, knowing that we were going to close this bought deal, we've initiated another dozen or so columns, principally at Mainspring. And that's really the critical path item. We wouldn't expect those columns to be available for pull down until probably the second quarter of 2025. And then, of course, this morning we announced the pre-feasibility study itself with M3 and all the other sub-consultants that were involved with the PEA, moving now forward with them with this pre-feasibility study.
Great, and PFS, let's talk about it. What's the path ahead? Second half of 2025 is still the anticipated timeline?
Yeah, internally within the company, we're showing a delivery date of July of 2025. Sometimes these things can get pushed out. And what is really unknown is really when the column test can be pulled down and we've reached sort of maximum extraction or an extraction where the QP is comfortable to be able to pull the columns down. That's really the kind of moving part of the jigsaw, so to speak. But we would anticipate second half of next year, the PFS will come to the market.
Okay, and I guess another variable in there, the permitting. You had permitting previously for the previous PEA.
Yep.
Walk us through what you're expecting there.
Well, we've gone ahead and submitted the applications for the permits for the PFS in February, which obviously is null and void. But the rationale for that was that by the end of this year, very early next year, we will be in possession of those permits. And really, we just wanted to show the market that because we're on private land, there's no federal nexus. We only deal with the state regulators. Once we apply for a permit and it's administratively accepted, within 6 months, we can get the major permits on the project. So that's the whole sort of strategy behind that. We're unable at this juncture to apply for the permits as per the PEA because there's additional work required, mainly around hydrology and geotechnical work. That will only be completed at the end of this calendar year.
Yeah.
And with the permits in hand for the PFS in February, in the first half of 2025, we would then apply for the amended permits as per this PEA and PFS. And by the end of 2025, we would expect we'd have the final permits in hand that would allow us to move forward and build the project.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
I guess we touched on it briefly there, but the rescoping of this project to, from underground to open pit, walk us through that process. It's quite a drastic rescope, I guess, and it has maybe changed the economics of the project quite significantly.
Well, absolutely. I mean, obviously acquiring the Mainspring property in March of this year and getting legal title to this property has been very transformational for the project and the company. So now that we can open pit mine Mainspring, as we advance to the north, that mineralization at Mainspring leads us all the way into Park Salyer. Now, Park Salyer previously was an underground sublevel cave operation with more sustaining capital, higher operating costs. The fact that we can economically mine Mainspring all the way down to Park Salyer now means that we can economically mine Park Salyer as an open pit scenario, reducing the operating costs, lowering the cutoff grades, bringing in more mineralization to the mine plan, and subsequently improving the economics significantly. So we went from 500 million NPV in the PFS to today $2 billion NPV 8 after tax and an IRR of 24% after tax. And of course, 94% of all the tons now being mined are coming from open pit mining, which significantly reduces or lowers the execution and the operating risk on the project.
Yeah, I guess let's talk about that operating risk. I think it's the value proposition with Arizona Sonoran is really the amount of de-risking that has been done on this project and continues to be done is very impressive. A lot of work and a lot of money been spent to do so. I guess when it comes to other factors that might influence that risk or change the path towards production, walk us through maybe some of the other work that's been done to really de-risk this as a major copper project.
Well, I would say that, obviously social license is very, very important. So 3 months before these results in the PEA went to market, and we could actually see that, this was going to be a much larger open pit scenario, we actually went to the state regulators and we had some preliminary discussions with them at a very high level as to what, we would be producing with this PEA. We did the same with the city council. We did the same with the mayor's office and the mayor himself. And I can tell you that the response that we've received has been absolutely positive. We still maintain a very strong social license. And obviously, this is now a generational mine with a 31-year mine life. And I would expect over time, we're going to continue to add to that mine life with further exploration success. So social license is very important. We're in the process of commissioning what we call a perception survey, where we would have a pollster go out into the community, 500 to 600 people would be interviewed, and we would get feedback from them on what are their biggest concerns or positives with respect to the project, see how that has changed over time, as this would be the third perception survey that we've completed on this project in the last 4 years.
Okay. And in terms of infrastructure on site, it's private land?
It's private land.
Water, power, road access, paint a picture for us.
Yeah, we're in a very fortunate situation and a unique situation with world-class infrastructure, quite literally on our doorstep. So we're 75 kilometers south of Phoenix. Phoenix has a population in the greater area of 4.5 million people. So there's lots of vendors, lots of suppliers there. We don't have to keep vast amounts of inventory on our shelves, given, that's only an hour's drive away. We're 120 kilometers north of Tucson with a population of 1 million people, same situation. We've got the Maricopa-Casa Grande Highway on our southern border. The Union Pacific Southern Rail Line is there. So remember, when ASCU mined here in the 1970s and 80s, they produced a copper concentrate that went into rail cars and got shipped out to a smelter in El Paso, Texas. So we can bring in things like sulfuric acid, which is a big, consumer. We can take out our copper cathode, all using rail, subsequently minimizing our own greenhouse gas emissions. And I think lastly, the main power line from the Palo Verde nuclear reactor just west of Phoenix transects the property, has more than enough excess power on it, and that gives us access to 100% green energy. Plus the property comes with water rights to the year 2070, and there's an abundance of water actually in the ground in a natural aquifer that's only permitted for industrial use.
Okay, so that interesting. So sorry, the aquifer there, it can't be used for drinking water at all. It's only for commercial.
It naturally contains certain elements like selenium, chromium, and zinc, meaning it's not potable water. Farmers and ranchers cannot tap into that water supply without, first of all, treating the water, because obviously we want to keep that out of the food chain.
Yeah, interesting. I haven't heard of that before.
Yeah,
That's
so as I
quite a
said, it's
stroke of
very,
luck.
very unique and fortunate
Yeah.
situation to be in.
I want to talk briefly about that Newton technology, bio-leaching technology they're using at the project. It's going to be integrated into the next PFS.
Correct.
Tell us a bit more about it. What's the impact of the technology? What's the agreement to use it?
Yeah. So we completed metallurgical testing phase 1 last year. We saw recoveries between 70 and 85%, which is exceptional for the leaching of a primary sulfide, in this case, chalcopyrite. The second phase column tests have now started up down in Bindura in Australia, and we would anticipate that by the summer of next year, we would be able to draw those columns down, and we'll have the results so that they can then feed into an integrated Newton PFS on top of our own standalone PFS, which, as we said earlier, would come out probably sometime in the summer of next year. If Newton is able to see a plus 20% uplift on the NPV over and above the standalone case, then Rio Tinto has the ability to earn into the project at 40% at the asset level. Of course, they have to pay the Arizona Sonoran shareholders for 40% of the base case value at a 0.65 times PNAV multiple that we've already built into the agreement. And of course, each party would then be responsible for their share of the project financing and all ongoing costs. If that option to JV was triggered with the monies that Rio Tinto would have to provide to the company, essentially our project financing would be completed. So from a de-risking perspective, as far as financing and execution, the project is then completely de-risked.
Okay. No, it's an interesting agreement. I guess we've covered some of the ground that it maybe takes us to the end of next year in terms of the work that's going to be completed, and the immediate path forward is fairly clear. But in terms of into 2026 and beyond, walk us through some of those scenarios. What's the pathway to this becoming a mine?
Well, immediately following PFS in the summer of next year, we would launch into a definitive feasibility study. We see that now being completed in the first half of 2026. Hopefully at that point in time, the Newton integrated PFS is showing really positive results, and then we can build Newton into the definitive feasibility study. We intend to bring various groups into our data room late this year, early next year, and then work with us under an NDA over the next 12 to 18 months to get comfortable with the project, so that when we announce the definitive feasibility study in the first half of 2026, we can announce project financing and make a financial investment decision at that juncture in time. The good news is that the project is still showing a relatively quick construction and development period of only 18 to 24 months. So if we can execute on that schedule, we can still see copper cathode here in the first half of 2028.
Okay, fantastic. Well, George, just to wrap up, for maybe a retail investor, somebody who might be watching this video and learning more about Arizona Sonoran, in your view, what sets the company apart from your peers, and maybe why is now an interesting time for an investor to get involved?
Well, I think obviously in the junior sector, a lot of equities have been really depressed. I mean, obviously from a macro perspective, everybody's paying attention to what's going on in China and the policy there and the property market. I do believe that Europe is coming out of the doldrums, and we're going to start to see real GDP growth there heading into 2025. And it looks as if here in North America, particularly the US, there's going to be a soft landing. I think once we can get the US election out the way, we're likely in 2025 to see copper prices significantly rising. And if you look at Arizona Sonoran compared to its peers, it's very, very undervalued. We're trading at under 0.1 times price to NAV. So I think with all of the great things, aspects concerning the project, and then the macro picture changing heading into 2025, I think the company is heading towards a major re-rate. And if any investor out there is interested in the junior copper space with near-term copper development stories, I would absolutely say that they should have Arizona Sonoran at the top of their list for potential investment in the next 6 months.
Great. Well, George, Certainly a busy time ahead throughout the end of this year and into 2025. Lots of exciting updates. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, James.